Hi, this is Peter Godinez, your ambassador with K80Y TV, and we're having another version of Good Morning Oxnard, or as we like to say, Wake Up Oxnard. And these, again, one of my favorite sessions, having a chance to engage and get some wisdom from George Miller of Citizen USA. And George, we've had a little sabbatical, so like we're refreshed, we're ready to go.
We've been ships passing in the night. You've been in some different shows, I've been in some different shows. It's only like once this year I think we've connected, right?
Well, I really think the world turns a little faster when we get together.
It definitely does.
But lots is going on though.
A lot is going on actually. During the holiday season, things really slowed down in Oxnard quite a bit. Everyone's celebrating the holiday and all that, and it's a really heavy agenda going on. I was at the city council meeting last night, which is kind of the focal point for it all. Brings all the different committees to work to different purposes, different affairs. They all eventually have to come to the city council to get approved or discussed in some way. So I use that as my focus for the government side of the news. But just to cover what happened in the last week or so, some things I'm going to talk about are in the council, some things are outside the council. But Oxnard uses what is called citizens advisory groups.
Citizens advisory groups.
These are official committees that are sanctioned by the city that are designed to advise on policy and actually make some decisions. So last night was the annual appointment of people. And they actually held a meeting a week ago for all of the candidates to speak. The mayor addressed them all and asked each one of them a couple of questions about why they want to be on the committees and what would they do when they got on the committee. 70 candidates for several different groups.
That's 7-0.
7-0.
Wow.
Now the problem is that there were more candidates than there were positions. This was a little bit like Oscar night. I mean, the people sitting there that were really, really anxious about this thing. It was just like they were interviewing for a job or a non-paid job in this case. And I know about a third of the people who were there, so it was interesting because I had a little bit of stake because these are buddies of mine. For example, Vincent Stewart, who got appointed to the planning committee last night, he was sitting there like he was waiting for a child to be born or something like that. And he was very, very happy when he got the appointment.
You know, it's amazing because during our calisthenics before we do this, we talked about who the movers and shakers are in Oxnard. And, so I'm glad you mentioned that person's name, but who else in that group? I mean, those are the people somehow we need to give like a shout out and, say the names.
We really do. I actually have a list of some. I'm going to read a couple of names later on.
Pick out your favorite. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm not
They're all his favorites.
Vince is one of my favorites, by the way.
Vince, and that was Vince who?
Vince Stewart.
Vince Stewart.
And Vince is very active around the community. He's been on the police reserve. He's done all kinds of things. He's helped me on different articles I've written. So he and I got to be friends over the last year or so that I've been covering the city council. And he stood out. Several people that got also on the community relations board too, which is very controversial. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But let me give you an idea of the scope of what the CAGs are. CAG stands for Citizens Advisory Group. We have a homelessness commission. But they're advising to try to focus the city's resources, in some cases county resources. How do you attack this homeless problem? And the answer is not putting them in shelters, by the way. That's a stopgap solution. But Mr. Brown, the new homelessness guy who's working for both Ventura and Oxnard, wants to focus on what are the root causes. Right? And he doesn't want to give people things that make it easy for them to take. He wants them to give something in return, basically to sign up to some kind of a program to improve themselves and pull themselves off the street and out of poverty. But then people like Carmen Ramirez, our mayor pro tem, points out that a lot of those people can't help themselves. They're either mentally deficient or disabled in some way and are going to need permanent help. So that formula is not going to work for those folks. But I'm getting a little bit off the subject. We have the library board, which advises the library. We have the Parks and Recreations Committee, which had 24 applicants to fill only 7 positions. And a lot of these people have agendas. They're not happy with how their neighborhoods are being serviced, so they're trying to get on these committees to try to steer and influence the city policy and the spending to help the parks in their neighborhoods. So there's more interest in that than any other single committee. The Planning Commission, I think, is probably the single most important and influential commission in the city because it affects land development, what we're going to build, how we're going to build it, and people win or lose based on these decisions. Then we have the Senior Services Commission, and they're pushing for more senior services, a new senior center, which has already been designed in concept which we've presented before. And then we have a brand new committee called the Cultural Arts Committee. No appointments were made last night. They haven't even organized it yet. But this is probably a major new initiative on the part of the city.
And so the category's been created.
Just been created. They did not staff that one last night. And then finally we have the Housing Authority, which is really, if you watch the city council meetings, you notice there's two guys that sit on either end who are not city council members. They're housing commissioners. And anytime a housing issue is discussed, they have to be at that meeting, and they're actually paid, the only paid commissioners I know. I think they're paid $50 a session to be there and rule on housing-related decisions.
But most of these people are non-paid positions.
Yeah,
would you say?
virtually everything else is a volunteer.
How much empowerment do these people are they have?
That's a very good question. You know, at the CAG meeting last week, there was a lot of bitching and moaning about that because the commissions feel that they don't have too much power. They're frequently overruled or ignored by the city council. The city council responds in kind, hey, these people are not trained, they're not disciplined, they're not following parliamentary procedure, so sometimes the results coming out of the commissions aren't what they'd like to see.
Interesting to know.
The mayor and all the council are supporting qualitatively improving the citizens advisory groups by improving the training, improving adherence to the parliamentary procedure, trying to improve the quality of the people coming in. I mean, every single one of these people had to fill out an application. In some cases, they submitted 2-inch thick, 3-ring binders of their background. They were extensively questioned. They had to make presentations. They were, to some extent, vetted. And then last night, we actually had an election where the city council members went through each list, 70 people in total, and voted. In some cases, they had to go to 3 different ballots to finally get down to the people that were selected for all these different positions. Now, Dan Pineda, who's one of our guest writers, and he goes to every city council meeting, he rarely misses one, wrote an article on the CAG meeting last week, which I recommend you go on to citizensjournal.us or Citizens Journal Ventura County and read it to get a better appreciation of what's really going on behind these CAGs.
Now, since they're not being paid, there's obviously some motivation, and my guess is they're very passionate.
They're very passionate about the community. They're very passionate about the issues. In some cases, they have self-interest. They want to improve the community for themselves as well as the rest of us.
Right, but there's
some of them may have a political
motivation,
agenda, but most of them really believe in what they're doing.
Some of them like to be on this venue and be able to talk about their passion. Do you think?
I think we could easily get several, and in fact, I'll talk to them at your request.
Well, we look forward to having everybody who is on this list.
So that's just one item. I could probably do a whole show.
Let's
on
go
that
for it
by itself. Next, the council members belong in some cases up to 10 or 15 boards each, and they go to these meetings and they act as a liaison to the city. For example, transportation board, the airport board, and stuff like that. And they're responsible for making decisions on behalf of the city, then coming back and getting approvals. And basically, they didn't make any changes. They approved the same setups that we had last year. There was a major reordering about 1.5 years ago after Councilman Perillo came on board. They did a lot of shifting around. They chose not to do that this week. You can look at the specific appointments on citizensjournal.us, or we'll be doing an article this week, or you can go directly to the City of Oxnard website and see those commissions as well, I believe. Some big news last night is the annual financial report. It's called CAFR, which stands for Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, was presented last night.
CAFR.
This is the equivalent of an annual report for a corporation, only it's for a city, and it falls under city laws, and the accounting rules are totally different than a real company and a real thing.
Who writes it? Who coordinates it?
Well, the CAFR is written by our financial department, but it has to be done by an outside auditor. So an outside auditor went through it, and also a consultant that was retained by Mr. Greg Nyhoff, our city manager. Mr. Dice also vetted that report as well. And he had done some preliminary reports commenting on the state of the city's finances, and the CAFR basically confirmed what he had said already. Namely, that the city has been treading water for 7 years. We have a total asset net value of $1.8 billion, by the way, when you consider the value of all the things on the books. And that number has not really gone up or gone down much the last few years. The problem is we have some real dangers. First of all, we have $232 million in unfunded liabilities for pension plans alone.
Wow.
It's a serious liability that the city's dragging along. And The city retirement benefits are excellent, by the way. In fact, they're a lot better than what the average slob gets who works in private industry, as I can attest to personally. Secondly, we have a large amount of deferred maintenance on our water system, wastewater system, roads, and parks.
It's a pretty big list.
It's huge. I mean, it's probably the better part of $1 billion.
That much.
I mean, it's over 100 million, maybe 150 million in streets alone. Well over $200 million for wastewater. Water is almost an open checkbook because we not only have the infrastructure deterioration, but we're trying to expand capacity via the desalinization programs and recycling programs. And we have something called the GREAT program, which is at least $400 million. And we're about halfway through that program right now to ensure water supplies for the city in the future. Oxnard is almost unique in Ventura County in that it imports a lower percentage of water than I think any other city.
Seriously,
For
all
example,
of Ventura County.
Examples, Thousand Oaks imports 97% of their water. Oxnard imports only 40%. That's a huge difference.
That is a difference.
Yeah, we're blessed with some water sources and groundwater and all that, but that groundwater unfortunately is being rapidly depleted. And because we're a coastal community, we have the additional danger of salt intrusion as well. And if you don't keep up the pressure of the fresh water, I'm not an expert on hydronics and all that, but basically the salt water will come in and take over. It's already under a strawberry field, so we're having a problem there. So that's
interesting. I can see how we can do shows on this. It's all fascinating.
Oh, you could do a show on that. Now, finally, the final number is that the city is $440 million in debt, in addition to all the liabilities that I mentioned already. Now, mayor candidate from last year, Larry Stein, mentioned that a major lack in the city's finances, it doesn't have what he calls a sinking fund or accruals, basically saving money for making these infrastructure improvements in future years. We only have maybe like 50 million in total on all the different utilities against the hundreds of millions of dollars that we need. So he would like to get that recommendation implemented.
Yeah, and Larry's a practitioner of finance.
Larry's a CPA.
We've had him on the show, so
Larry's a real character.
Hey, Larry.
He knows what he's talking about.
Yes, hard to argue with that.
Now, a lot of things that happen in the meeting, what I would call pro forma approvals. They're just big sections of things where the council approves them with very little debate unless someone on the council wants to make an issue of it. And I just happened to notice that one of those items in the long list was about $1 million last night.
About $1 million.
$975,000 was approved with virtually no debate. Just a brief summary to design the new Rice Avenue. I guess it's an overpass or something like that. That involves an environmental review and only preliminary engineering to do. That's $1 million. They got approved just like that. With almost no debate. Another $150,000 was approved for dispersion for the arts, cultural arts. I don't know who it's going to, or why, or how, or what the conditions are. $150,000 approved, just like that.
Do you think every subject should have somewhat of a debate clarification? Because the board meeting is perception.
Our meetings are so damn long already. I mean,
so
2 weeks ago it was 6.5 hours. Last night it was an early meeting. We were out of there by 10:30. But we spend a lot of time in meetings already.
Aren't those meetings like on the arts stuff done by a commission who lets the council know?
But that was not discussed at the city council meeting. So yes, a lot of that stuff is deliberated at lower level committees beforehand, including the CAGs, and then it gets to the city council where the city council approves, but the visibility to the average citizen is not good. Now, in all fairness, most of these items have an attached report which you can read, and if someone has a problem, they do have the option to get up and speak about it, and then the council can also bring up by exception items that they don't like. But in practice, these appointment items and information consent items are usually approved almost by default.
Interesting.
Yeah, but it's like the Rice Avenue overpass. I mean, the reason for that is that Route 1, the PCH, used to be Oxnard Boulevard, and it was changed to Rice Avenue, so that whole area was committed to be making an improvement. In fact, you know, where the Santa to the Sea race is, they're talking about a whole new environment to make it look more pleasing as you're driving through Oxnard.
Yeah, definitely, and then also traffic as well, which is really the main reason for I guess, that new project that we're talking
and
about.
that's voice of Bob Allen, our executive producer.
There you go.
I'm not a
I
ventriloquist.
thought that was the voice of God.
I think that was entertaining. Well, Peter's a ventriloquist. Thank you, Bob.
Can't keep it quiet.
Okay. Late last year, I think it was late December, a major appropriation was made for the library. Basically, the library has $500,000 approved for technology improvements.
Interesting.
And that is going to consist of a new library management system, which is the software that manages the books, the checkout, fines, people registering, and ultimately also access to ebooks as well.
That's what something I was going to ask you. So ebooks are going to be a part of their process.
Yeah, we already have some ebooks. There's some online references now, but the city just contracted with a company whose name I can't remember right now to provide access to ebooks. So people will be able to do that probably around July 1st or sooner. They'll be able to check out books online, which will be downloaded to their computer on a temporary license, which turns into a pumpkin in 2 weeks, I believe, and people can read the book.
I'm encouraged by where libraries are going. I think they're going to transform, but I think it's good.
Right, and if you've looked at the library website, it's gotten more and more sophisticated with more and more features over the years. That's about to expand tremendously. The current library management system was put in about 2001. It's obsolete. And to make things worse, due to the budget crunch of the recession, the city was not able to buy the software updates to keep it up to date for several years. So now it's hopelessly obsolete. So Barbara Murray, who's our library director, undertook a search and found a new library management system. And we're writing a story on that, which will appear in Citizens Journal next week. I interviewed her key staff yesterday. They took me through the systems, and also an outside consultant was on the call as well. And I'm going to write up the results of that, and so people will get a better idea of what the city is doing for technology improvements in the library, but more importantly, how they would be able to access it and the benefit to them as well.
I hope the library in Oxnard will be a beacon for other cities.
It really is. It's probably more important in Oxnard than most cities in the county because the average income in Oxnard is very low.
Compared to all the municipalities.
Yeah, the average person in Oxnard does not have the means to go on Amazon and buy a book for $50 or something like that. But they can go to the library and get it for free.
Right.
But the library does other things too. They have various instructional programs. They have various educational programs. For example, last Saturday they had a special on the Tuskegee Airmen, which is a pioneering group of black aviators that were very important in World War II, and it's really kind of little known. And they brought out some little known facts at that presentation, and that's just one of many things that they do. They have meeting rooms available and stuff like that as well. Some of you have heard that the Phillips 66 is building a refinery in the San Luis Obispo area. You think, well, how does that affect us? Well, it turns out that to get the oil to the refinery, right now is being done by truck. And they want to put in a rail siding in Oxnard, which means we'd be running 100-car, 1.25 mile long trains through Oxnard regularly. And there's a fair amount of citizens' opposition to that. So the city wrote a letter in protest to building that railroad siding, asking for alternate transportation methods. But it's a little bit more complex than it looks, because if the city refuses to do that, they're going to do it by truck instead, which is even worse. So I brought that up at the city council meeting last night, and Councilor McDonald said, well, it's not our problem. I guess it went by truck, it'd go by Route 5, not by Route 101, or not by the train. So it's kind of like not my backyard. And another alternative would be a pipeline, but it turns out there's not enough oil to justify the cost of a pipeline.
That would cause a lot of construction, digging.
A lot of construction. So there's no.
Why would you put a refinery where there's no source of oil?
Are you kidding? There's oil drilled right here in Oxnard and all the way up the coast.
I understand. So why do it in San Luis Obispo?
That's a tremendous location because there's a lot of oil between here and there. Plus, if you go just a little bit north and west of here, there's thousands of oil wells between Bakersfield and here.
Yeah, but those oil fields are already pumping and going to refineries in the South Bay.
Well,
why not expand those refineries?
In California and oil in the last few years. There have been three major innovations in oil. First of all, there's something called fracking, which you're all familiar with, and certain environmentalists think that shouldn't be done at all. And we have something called horizontal drilling that enables you, once you drill down into the ground, you can branch off and get a whole bunch of wells from that one single drill, which is better environmentally, but it's also a lot cheaper to do. And the third is that there are a lot of new sonic computer-based mapping things where you can drill with much more certainty to find oil than you ever could before. What that means is that it's a whole new lease on life for the California oil industry. California is now the 4th largest oil producer of the United States. It used to be the 3rd until they managed to exploit the deposits in North Dakota. So now North Dakota is pretty high on the list. So oil is a very big factor in Oxnard. There are dozens of oil wells in Oxnard, including 12 almost within sight of my house down on the beach. So it's a big industry.
It's very educational because I did not know that.
You go to the Mulhart Ranch. You'll see oil. You'll see
right out in
oil
the fields you can find oil well. But the oil industry keeps a very low profile. They're very friendly. They're fairly clean. But there are some problems. One of the problems is the Antera disposal facility in the east part of Oxnard, which has been found to be exceeding their license of the number of truckloads they can handle a day. Now, after the Santa Paula incident, where there was an explosion, was that December, was it? It seems like forever, which caused $6 million worth of damage and environmental hazards, they're taking the overflow up there and they're moving it to Antera. So there's a lot of community protest about it. There was a meeting held at the Board of Supervisors of Ventura County yesterday, and there were dozens of people that protested that and asked the county not to allow the additional disposal at the Antera site.
And you're going to write more about this in details on your...
I don't know how much detail. I'll mention it and I'll link to different places where you can see the results.
Like everything we talked about, like shows.
Right, everything I talked about you can watch on video on the City Council archives and also now on the Ventura Board of Supervisors, which is televised as well. But quite a few activists from Oxnard went up to that meeting yesterday afternoon and spoke during the afternoon in shifts, I think. So there's quite a bit of that. So those are the main things I want to talk about today. Any questions or comments?
No, I just think I'm glad we mentioned names because I hope we can promote that when we mention somebody's name or an organization, those are the movers and shakers.
I agree.
Committees.
By the way, we will list all of the new CAG appointees in our article coming out probably Friday, I guess, and some of these other things that we mentioned as well.
Right, and I hope everybody that's on that list and we mentions, we tell them, we're promoting you, and we want to hear about your cause, and we hope we're some kind of vehicle to have it.
Well, there is a vehicle that's a little hard to get to. But the city council meetings and a couple of key commission meetings are televised and put online. I was interested in what happened at a particularly controversial community relations meeting. I think it was in November, and I asked, is this televised? And people said, I don't know. And then someone said, yeah, it's televised. I said, where do I find it online? Well, you don't. Well, you have to make a special information request, which costs $10 to get it. I finally got it after about 3 days, but it's not as transparent as the other commissions. And it's mainly because of cost. It costs a lot of money, as you know, and time to produce these TV things and edit them and get them uploaded to where they're understandable. And we don't.
That's when you have a time limit involved with it, for traditional television, or you have an agenda that you're trying to do and push. I think that's the whole concept about what we're trying to do here, is that what you see is what you get. Ooh.
Pretty much.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it was very kind of you asked me if you have any questions, but everything you report has like opposing views, and it's like depending on where you are. As a mentor for solutions, what would you say the spirit of our community in Oxnard needs to be, since everybody is got agendas, opinions, different goals?
Well, I think we need to agree on common stuff, and there has been a lot of common agreement I've sensed at the meetings and even heard. Almost everyone agrees that public safety and infrastructure are the two major priorities of the government in Oxnard. But the secondary priority right behind that are quality of life issues. Parks, homelessness, kids and stuff like that, cultural arts. Those are things right behind that. And the question is, where's the money going to come from? Oxnard's a poor community. The average family income is like about $50,000. That sounds like a lot if you live in West Texas, but in California it isn't. I have no idea how some of these families with 5 or 6 kids feed them. I go to Oxnard, I go to, let's say, Costco in Oxnard and try to buy enough for my wife and I, and I'm thinking 6 people. I don't know how a guy that makes $30,000 a year can support himself in the community.
That's a reality that exists, and hopefully we're part of the solution here versus part of the problem, as the saying goes.
Yeah, the attitude is pretty positive, and I think a lot of people are most upset that Oxnard has a bad reputation because of crime in Oxnard, because of poverty in Oxnard, because of infrastructure in Oxnard. And they're looking at the main priorities, and one important thing that's happening this year that's never happened before is that they're going to a new method of budgeting. It's called priority-based budgeting. And priority-based budgeting says that before you lay out a budget, you poll the community on what they think is really important and realign the budget to meet those priorities in priority sequence, taking into account things that have to get done like public safety. And on March 4th of this year, there will be an open community meeting to discuss community priorities that will be directly used for input to the new budget being done by Mr. Dice and ultimately by Mr. Nyhoff. And this will be our first experiment with priority-based budgeting. We have written articles on this before, and the city will be using Denver's approach to priority-based budgeting as a model for what we're doing here. And if you Google us, you can find that online. Google priority-based budgeting, Denver, citizensjournal.us, and it should come up. If it doesn't, email me at publisher@citizensjournal.us. I will send you a link on that article.
I just want to wrap up here, but you mentioned Greg Nyhoff. If first impressions are important, I really believe we have a good leader in Greg. I know his choice in brides because his wife is a liaison. I like saying that word, a volleyball. So I look forward to get to know him better, but I think Greg is a good leader, and he looks the part, and now he needs to do the part. So with that,
he's got the experience, he's got the attitude, he's got the contacts. He's brought a lot of people in to help us. He's making quite a few organizational changes.
Sometimes when you're a coach, you got to do that.
Yeah, I think we talked about those at the last session.
Well, repeat is good, and we were very emotional, so people are going to remember it. But it's always a pleasure having a collaboration with you. I hope it makes a difference in this world. And so I want to say thank you so much for watching. Peter Godinez, your ambassador, K80Y TV. Until next time.